Well, giving an update on the ongoing investigation into the death of 6 children from Naledi in Soweto, Health Minister Dr Gerhard said preliminary findings were showing the likelihood that the children consumed snacks contaminated with the highly toxic organophosphate called turbifos. For several years, there have been calls to have some insecticides and rat poison be de-shelved. Let's now discuss this now with toxicologist at the Griffin Poison Information Center, Dr Gerhard Verdoorn, about these poisons and how they end up in communities. Dr Verdoorn, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Just first of all, before we deal with some of the issues in relating to what is currently happening, do you think that we have a reactionary process when it comes to dealing with issues of this nature? Because it's not the first time that this has become a problem when we speak about organophosphate, or some people know is to be called hyperpyrim.
Yeah, unfortunately, I must agree with you that our response is actually super reactionary, because I've been trying my level best since 2010 with authorities to get rid of things we call aldicarb, which is also very similar to that hyperpyrim, and hyperpyrim seems to be cutting across both aldicarb and turbifos, and turbifos only came into play a couple of years ago in the country, but both of these substances are sold by street vendors and some spaza shops in the country, and I've been warning the authorities and the police that there's a calamity coming, and now precipitated in the one case of 6 children dead, but we know of many more deaths in the country, all across the country, in Gauteng, in the Limpopo province, in the Free State, in the Western Cape, all over the place. So unfortunately, the reaction was too slow, and my panic is that what about the future, and my concern is what about the loss of life of young children that had a life ahead of them. So we need to be far more proactive in terms of these illegal poisons being sold at the street corners or in some of the spaza shops, and I'm only saying some because I've been to some which are really fantastic spaza shops. So we can't label everybody, but it is far too reactionary, as you said in the beginning.
Yeah, and here's the thing, if you look at that petition that was started by Basi Mushweshwe back in 2021, she wanted about 500 signatures, only 316 people have signed, and this was in reaction to her sister committing suicide or dying by suicide using this so-called hyperpyrim, and she does make reference to the work that you have done. But what she also calls on is that law enforcement should take action. Now, how does law enforcement ensure that there is compliance, both from the vendor side as well as from household side, to say that, unfortunately, you can't use this in a household because this is an agricultural pesticide?
Yes, I remember that case very well because a young girl phoned me up, and I worked with her very nicely. But she didn't make much of an impact on the whole problem with, I think at that time it was actually aldicarb and not turbifos. And we appealed to the Joburg Metro and to the police and the Metro Police, everybody, please go out, walk the streets, confiscate all these illegal poisons which are packaged in small little shrink wraps or polyethylene bags or whatever else, and tell people this stuff is not supposed to be sold, because it's a life-threatening case if you buy the chemical or sell the chemical. And like I said before, we cannot only point the finger at authorities. We as the citizens must also help the authorities by reporting this, and don't buy the stuff, because the law of life is, if you create the market, then people will supply the market. And unfortunately, it's come to a point now where I speak to some of the street vendors, and they tell me there are foreign nationals with big depots in certain towns, like Leberg where I live, where they repack the stuff from the boxes and they break it, take it then out to the street vendors to sell it to people. And unfortunately, our people don't understand the gravity of buying turbifos or aldicarb. They take it home, and there you've got the mortality of a couple of children. And I know there are many more people than the 6 we know that died in Soweto, unfortunately.
Yeah, then what should the approach be? Because maybe the household's argument could be that, listen, we're dealing with a lot of rodents. They've infested our communities, and they've just made life hell for us. And that's the reason why we go for these type of products, because we don't have any other alternative that is cheaply available also, because that's the other thing. It's cheaply available, only 10 Rand.
It's not that cheap. With 10 Rand, if you buy the 10 Rand packet of hyperpyrim, whether it's aldicarb or turbifos, doesn't matter, you're not going to be able to kill more than a couple of rats. But if you go to a spaza shop, and I went to a very good one last week, which was so clean that I even bought stuff myself there, that you can buy yourself a rodenticide pack, which consists of 100 grams of rodenticide for 30 Rand, which you can use for a whole month to control rats in your own little premises. So people must look at the larger picture, not just look at a cheap little 10 Rand option compared to 30 Rand, which is enough to sustain yourself for 30 days to keep the rats under control in your premises. So, and I think it's a case of we have to educate our own citizens on what is available in the market. So buy a registered rodenticide, and don't even call the poisons rodenticide, because they're not rodenticides. They're technically only lethal poison that should not be sold to anybody out there. And we should also then educate our street vendors not to buy and sell the stuff. And we should also inform our authorities what these things look like, because many of our people that are inspectors or police officers or metro cops do not know what these things look like. So they walk past the street vendor, they see the stuff there, and it doesn't trigger a response from them. And I think it's the fault of society that we haven't all taken hands and alerted everybody to what these things look like, and get the people then with the epaulets on the shoulders to take it away, put it into a certain safe place, and make a plan to get it disposed of, because that stuff should not be in the hands of everybody. The haloferimi or the turbifos, they are registered ones that are only supposed to be in the hands of farmers. They need it desperately for controlling nematodes in things like citrus and potatoes and maize. And if we don't have that, we're going to lose a lot of our crops. But it should not be on the streets sold as an illegal poison by street vendors or by spaza shops.
Yeah. Dare we say that the very same law enforcement agencies, if you just consider, for instance, some of our socialization and growing up and knowing that haloferimi is being used to kill rodents and so forth, themselves are actually consumers or buyers of these products.
Yeah, and I think it's a case of, everybody points a dirty finger at the Department of Agriculture. You must understand, Agriculture Department regulates our pesticides very stringently. But unfortunately, with the criminalization of South African society, and I think we're all part of it, that we don't abide by the laws, these things just became a common commodity in the circles of life out there. And we expect the Department of Agriculture to take control of it. They simply cannot, because the inspectorate is small compared to the nation out there, and we can't expect them only to go and do the law enforcement. So I expect mainly the African police and the metro cops to walk around and to confiscate the stuff and to inform the people that they should not be selling it out there. And again, to educate our citizens that we have a large number of registered rodenticides that are cheaply and affordable. And if you use them in a bait station, your chance of risk or anything happening to your child or your dog is actually very limited. So we can control the rats, but we have an underlying problem, is that our societies, and I'm talking about everybody, we are actually very unhygienic. We've got lots of rubble, lots of waste food, and we create an absolute haven for rats. And if we don't clean that up, we're never going to beat the rats, whether we use haloferimi or whether we use a rodenticide. If we don't clean up the environment and deny the rats their breeding place and their food and their water, we're not going to beat it. So there's a multi-pronged approach required here. And I hope that the Department of Health will take the lead and start doing a campaign that we do cleanups and we take the rodent from control, and that the police will help us all together with Agriculture Department and Health Department to take the haloferimi of whatever nature, whether LDK or turbifos, off the streets.
Yeah, and we know with the experience with COVID-19 that it is possible to send through a strong message via the Department of Health and using various media platforms to say that there's a warning, guys, stop buying these rodenticides or the organophosphate, for instance. But here's another question, just in conclusion. So with the organophosphate being legal, for instance, in the agricultural sector, what is known about the suppliers and whether the suppliers themselves should be held accountable where some of these products are sold to the people that which you're talking about earlier on in large bags, and then they break it down in smaller little bags and repackage them to sell to tuck shop owners?
Well, suppliers are registered with the Department of Agriculture. They are licensed by the Department of Health with a Group 1 license to sell these chemicals, and they then sell it to a licensed distributor who sell it to a licensed agent who sell it to a farmer. So that chain of custody is very well controlled both by the Department of Agriculture and by the Department of Health. The problem happens that at the farm level, I think there's quite a bit of theft of chemicals there, and I've been a witness in a court case where a farmer caught a worker with 40 kilograms of this halothurine in the back of his vehicle. I also believe that sometimes there's theft in the value chain. It might be at transport, it might be at the depot level. So you cannot point a finger at the manufacturer. The manufacturers, together with myself within CropLife SA, have done our level best to close the value chain, to make sure that it doesn't spill out of the value chain into the illegal hands. But my concern is also that I know for a fact that all the LD carb in the country is being smuggled across the border from our northern boundaries or our northern neighbor. And I am now looking at whether the halothurine we see on the streets is also not possibly coming across the border in the same channel as we see with the LD carb. So I do not agree with people that call for a ban of turbifos, that it will solve the problem, because LD carb was formally banned by Mr. Muzunga, who's the Registrar of Act 36, in September 2016. And let me tell you now, there's more LD carb in the streets now. In 2012, when LD carb was still legal in agriculture in the country, because there's a flow of the stuff from foreign countries into our country. So there's a crime element there. There's not an issue with the chemical. The chemical is okay to be applied in agriculture. But if we don't have our grips on the crime syndication that bring these things in and repack them and supply them to street vendors and spaza shops and sell them to the public, we are not going to solve the problem. If we ban turbifos tomorrow, they will just go for something else and this crime will just continue. So we need to clamp down on the crime syndication and make sure that people don't bring this stuff into the country. And if they steal it from a value chain, if they're caught, they should be locked up for a long, long time, because it leads to the death of our people, which to me as a toxicologist and a chemist is unacceptable.
Dr. Verdoorn, thank you so much for your time. That was a toxicologist at the Griffin Poison Information Center, Dr. Gerhard Verdoorn.